Good evening, friends, neighbors, countrymen, and barrel-chested freedom fighters from all around the world. It's the Old Paratrooper again. I had to take a little bit of break. Just frankly, I've been busier than a one-armed farmhand at milking time. And that's pretty doggone busy. Well, here we are again, and there's a lot of stuff that's on my mind. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was Vladimir Putin's threat to use a tactical nuclear weapon in the current war in the Ukraine. Now, where is the war in the Ukraine? I would have to say it's in a stalemate for several reasons. Most importantly, we're going into winter, and I don't really see either the Russian army or the Ukrainian army doing anything large scale in the winter. Not because they don't have a history of operating in the winter, but they're both petered out. The Russians, I don't think they can defeat the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians, while I think they can make tactical successes, at the end of the day, I do not think they can defeat the Russians. They may be able to gradually push, coax, get the Russians off of some of their soil, but I don't think they'll ever be able to completely drive them out. Not unless the war radically changes. Now, the situation they have is Vladimir Putin. He's a despot, but he is no dummy. Although I would say his greatest miscalculation was going to war in the Ukraine. But he has made a threat to use a tactical nuclear weapon. And this is a pretty legitimate threat. The Russians have more nuclear weapons than anybody else in the world. Now, whether they can deliver them is another story. But in a battle against the Ukrainians, they may only need to use one. Maybe two, three, I don't know. But it's a legitimate threat. Now, what concerns me is not just the fact that Vladimir Putin has threatened to use a nuclear weapon, but we have some very shaky national leadership, and I'm going to talk about it later in another video about who is actually the President of the United States. It's certainly not Joe Biden. I mean, he's just a figurehead. He may have some sort of influence, but I think he's just a demented, sick old man who's just a placeholder. But that's for another video. Let's look at the situation here in the Ukraine. Again, it's stalemate. Winter's coming. The Russian army has kind of shot its wad. The Ukrainians have been very successful the past few weeks, but translating a tactical successes into large-scale strategic success, I'm not sure they can pull that off. I hope they do. I totally sympathize with the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian government, not so much. But probably the best thing that could come out of any of this is a negotiated settlement. But both sides have to want to have peace. And there's a whole lot of other players in this besides just the Ukrainians and the Russians. We have NATO, our own bizarre political leadership in Washington, D.C. currently. I think they have a strong desire to punish Russia and Vladimir Putin. It's really funny about Democrats. When the war is against someone like the Afghan war, they start out really enthusiastic about it, and then they turn against it. But I don't understand this obsession with wanting to take out Russia. I really don't. Anyway, I mean, don't get me wrong, Vladimir Putin's a bad guy, but he's a bad guy with a lot of nuclear weapons. Um, but for Russia to use a tactical nuclear weapon, it has to make sense. Uh, the war stalemated. Either side is going to get a decisive victory. If Russia did decide to use a tactical nuke, it's game over. Because the U.S. and NATO, we would go into a series of escalation. And retired General David Petraeus actually had a wonderful piece on it last weekend, which he talked about some of the things that would rapidly happen if Russia did decide to use a nuclear weapon. And it would not be good for Russia. Vladimir Putin would probably be overthrown in a coup fairly quickly, or he might turn the whole world into a cinder. Hard to tell. This is just really dangerous stuff, and I just don't have a lot of faith in our current regime in Washington, D.C. to successfully navigate these waters. As Joe Biden's old boss said, never underestimate the power of old Joe to screw things up. And that's the cleaned up version of the quote. So, I think that Vladimir Putin is bluffing. Because the Russians are very good at bluffing. But I also thought at the same time, I thought he was bluffing about going into the Ukraine. So, hopefully he's wizened up a little bit, or he has better advisors, or maybe he's killed enough of his advisors or removed them that he's got better ones. Anyway, it is a very dangerous and difficult time, my friends. So, continue to train, watch your six, and God bless America. And we'll all get through this, and those midterms, they can't come fast enough. God bless America, and each and every one of you too. Old Paratrooper out here.